I wasn't sure if this would be an entirely empty room, so I'm absolutely delighted that you're all here. This coming Wednesday, July 17, 2019, will mark the 20th anniversary of the new 9 holes here at the Dorset Field Club. It was quite a seminal event. We had a shotgun start, and Elise Wormser, then the oldest living golf champion at the Field Club, she hit the ceremonial first shot off the new first hole. And it was quite a to-do, a seminal event in the club's history. And I asked Eileen in the office, how many members, well, Michael Smith, Dick McDonough, Rosie, I don't know, I should know that. I asked Eileen in the office, how many members, percentage-wise, were members then who are members now? Because I didn't really know. And Patrick and I thought we were going to have to go through the whole club book, but she's got some computer deal to do. So anyway, it's 32%, which means that 68% of the membership don't really know anything about this. So, come on in, Michael.
We're waiting for you, Michael.
That Michael might be coming. Who knows?
And here's the fact checker.
Right. He joined in '97. So the reason for this talk today is to simply share that story. Okay. So the first thing to think about in the first slide, I guess, Patrick, is to remember how the holes were. You might remember this. I found an old placemat. These were on the tables a long time. Anyway, they had the old holes. So the sequencing of the holes is different. So if you look at the hole-in-one plaques, you might wonder how it is that Jeff Hills had a hole-in-one on number 5. So the first hole is not exactly where the 10th tee is now. The pro shop was across the sidewalk. The pro shop was over there. So the tee was over that way. Those cedar trees were planted to prevent people from being nailed as they came up from the tennis courts. Okay, they were about 6 feet tall at the time. They're more than that now. Anyway, that was the first hole. The second hole is now the 11th hole. The third hole is now the 6th hole. So just a second here.
Start over again.
All right. Where is the sucker? Oh, so that's the first hole, the 11th hole. The 6th hole is now the third hole. Now, the thing about that is there were no side tees. So it was 231. The championship tees were the tees. Men's and ladies, there's the tees. It was a par 4 for ladies. Okay? And from the back 9, you just used the back tees, the farther back, the 255, and that was a par 4. This was all forest over here. Okay? The 4th hole is now the 7th hole. That hasn't really been changed that much. And then the 5th hole was now the 8th hole. And then the 9th hole, which has been redone since a lot. But that was the 7th. That was the 6th hole. The 7th was here. Okay, the 8th. And then the 9th, the putting green was it was a par 5. And the putting green now was the green then. Okay? So when you had this set up, you could have 12 tee-off times, and then you have to have a gap. So those other people can make the turn. And then you can have another set. So you can have a maximum of 96 people a day. This was fine when in the 70s, everybody played tennis and no one played golf. But as the 80s happened into the 90s, that started to become more of a problem. Okay? So that was one thing of how things were. Before we get into other things, you should also know at this time there were members, full members, and there were junior members, and there were social members. That's it. If I'm single and you have 5 children, you pay 1 membership, I pay 1 membership. That's it. Okay? It was a very simpler time. Okay? In 1990, the dues were $1,200, and the initiation fee was $2,000. In 1996, just before the just at the land. The dues were $1,200, and the initiation fee was $8,600. So the board was kind of passing it on, but that remains static. All right, so I first thought I'd back up because we don't have the new 9 holes. We have the new 3 and new 6. Mr. DeShooter, how are you? Sit down. Some of this is going to involve you. That's good. Anyway, so let's go to the next slide, okay? All right, now I'm going to back up a little bit because a lot of the land was leased beforehand, okay? And this was I took the deed, and it was the Millard estate that we bought in 1953. Now, the thing, curiously about this, let's see if I can get this, right there, that's the Passero house. We owned the Passero house, okay? We owned it. But we wanted to buy all this. Dr. Pierce was willing to give us a lot of money for it, so they just kind of went into hock to buy the Millard estate and paid it all off by selling Passero to Dr. Pierce. So it was a good thing. We didn't own the Passero house. We owned it for about a month. So I think there was some sort of deal in there that I never got. So this amount, this takes in the 8th hole now, the 9th hole, the 1st hole, part of the 18th hole, and part of the 16th hole. Okay? So go to the next slide so you can see this a little more. So that same thing, imagine, I don't know how to use this. Okay, so here's where we are, okay? And here's they've sold off to Dr. Pierce. And so you have this thing, and it goes all the way to here. Okay, so the 16th hole is here. Okay, so this is a huge piece that we just leased prior to that. Okay, now after that, in 1959, we got this piece. Now this is a 53 map. I don't know why it is that it included this, because we didn't buy this part, 11 acres, until 1959. We'd gotten this part in the 1920s. Okay, now the thing about it is in 1959, we had owned 5 acres of Bear Paw. And in return for this 11 acres, we got that, okay? Now this is all very important because because it was landlocked, it all came with a right-of-way through Bear Paw lumber. So we always had that right-of-way. Emma Edgerton had sold all of this, and she retained a small lot, okay, which also had a right-of-way right across the thing. Years later, since the O'Learys are here, this is something to know. This says Roberts here. The town never knew that it's hard to track down a lot that she never deeded away, and then she died. Her heir was Roberts, and then it went on to Scott Casey. He didn't want to pay taxes on it. He didn't want anything to do with it. It went up for tax sale, and the field club was authorized to spend $1,500. Susan was sent by her husband to buy it, and decided to outbid by $1. So the O'Learys ended up with this. They sold it as part of a package to Roberta White, so 8 acres sounded better than 4, and they ended up with it. But it's a right-of-way to a swamp, so it's harmless.
We wanted to farm pigs and drive them to market across the club. Instead, we joined them.
So now you should know that this was all from Edgerton. So the next piece to go to, we're going to go back to this slide. It says Edgerton, which in 1975 was sold to Swanson. So go to the next slide. All right, this is in 1984. Okay, this is the Swanson piece. Okay, now the thing is, around this time in '84, the entire 22 acres, all the way to Route 30, was for sale. Okay, and the field club had an annual meeting, and the membership approved buying 5 acres. And the only problem was Mr. Swanson didn't want to sell 5 acres. He wanted to sell 22 acres. And they went back and forth and back and forth. No deal was made. Libby Sturgis, who Doug DeShooter now lives in that, Doug there. He now lives in that house. It had the lighting place for years. And it has this whole horseshoe shaped thing that's 15 acres. So anyway, Libby goes, to the club and says they want $153,000 for this. I understand the club has think, why don't I buy the whole thing and we'll have 2 deeds done. You pay your prorated share. You pay 50, I'll pay 100, and we're done. And that's what happened. They went back to the membership. They're authorized to have up to 8 acres. And that's how it happened. So the field club sort of had a chance to buy everything. Chet Andrews was the president then. He said, we're not in the real estate business. Larry Thompson, if any of you remember him, he went apoplectic. He's just like, they couldn't believe this. But that's what ended up. So we ended up having 7.2 acres. And that's essentially the 3rd hole. If we hadn't, now there was a survey of the membership. Most of the membership thought we were buying it for protection. A slightly lower amount thought it was good for the course. But most just thought it was protection. And so if we hadn't bought that, we couldn't do the same layout that we have now. Okay, next slide. Okay, now, could you go back all the way to the 1953 one? Okay, right here, okay, is the Prentice Brook and that little bridge. And I should use this modern technology. This is the Prentice Brook, and here's the 17th right here. Notice this is all on land that wasn't ours. This is what we discovered when we were doing all this. And we had like a dump up here near the 16th green where it is now. And in 1983, Art Groves, the president, who was an engineer, got an Act 250 permit to build the bridge over the Prentice Brook and everything. So I thought we owned it. And when we were having talks later on about the layout and everything, the late Bob Limbacher says, "You sure you own that, Kevin?" "Yeah, you got an Act 250 permit there." And then I found out that Bob was right. And I went to Bob later and I go, "How did you know that we didn't own that?" And he says, "I don't think Art wanted to know." So anyway, this is Marina Svetlova's house. It's now Kay Manley's. So anyway, she was a professor of dance at Indiana University, and for years had a little dance studio for little kids. You'd see little kids in tutus getting snow cones at Pelters and stuff like that. So I went up to see Marina. She was a very nice lady, and she had already seen her lawyer, and she goes, "Now, Kevin, I understand that I own land that you thought you owned and I thought you owned, but you haven't been using it for 15 years, so there's no adverse possession. Am I correct?" "Yes, Marina." "How about 20,000 and you get me a survey?" "Fine." That was my negotiating that was involved. So we paid 20,000 for that. Now going to and that little piece here, this is the whole survey. The bridge is over here and it goes up, so that cart path that goes down goes right over that. I thought we owned the bridge, but we didn't. So then go to the next one, the Pinio. Okay, this is the driving range. And during this whole time when we were trying to clean up what we owned and everything, this is woods, okay? And this is the Pinio property. They've been in the Pinio family since 1908. And it turned out not much of it had been on the driving range, but the thing is they were about to sell this half acre as a building lot. And the right of way went right over the driving range. It would have been disaster. So at this point, we had actually just been financing the lot. We took back a mortgage. We bought it for $41,000 and we took back a mortgage. The seller took back a mortgage. And it took about 3 or 4 years and it was paid off. 5. So, okay, now I'll go to the next one. So, for all these pieces, there's the Swanson lot in 84. There's the Zana Edgerton piece in 1959. We gave up that one there at that ring. And that left that's the Svetlova one. And we have Pinio. And you should know also in 1963, Carl and Harriet Parsons, they sold us the land essentially for the driving range. Okay? Tom Parsons' mother and father, if anybody knows him. The only thing that's weird about that is their leach field for the Smith house is right in the middle of that driving range. And but anyway, we bought that in 63, so that's already done. So to expand the 9 holes, there were only 2 places we really could go when we were thinking about where to go. And that's the McQueen Farm, which would have been pretty, flat and low. For the mother lode, this is the land that was owned by B. Humphreys, Scott, and Dr. Nims, Dr. Bob Nims. So we had always thought about maybe doing something, but it was just talk because Dr. Nims had made it known that he would never sell as long as Jim O'Neill III wanted to keep farming. I don't know if any of you know Jim O'Neill III, but he decided he was going to be doing landscaping now, so he no longer wanted to farm. Okay? So Dr. Nims is in. It's great. Scott always wanted to sell, and B. Humphreys said she'd sell it to us over her dead body. I don't know what B got in her bonnet. You never do. But that's what she said. And anyway, that's what happened. Because B was a very nice lady. She's one of these ladies who's about 3'5", and you following her in a car and you swear no one's driving. And her husband, Neil Humphreys, was one of the founding members of the Southern Vermont Art Center, a renowned painter. And she was a painter of some renown herself. And anyway, she was going along where the pottery store is now. There used to be Snare Associates. There used to be a U in there. And the policeman would always be there as a speed trap. And B one day went off the road and broadsides the car with the cop in it. You and I'm sure, would be in jail, something. But a month and a half later, she has a new car.
Oh my God.
And she's coming down from the Arts Center at a reception between 5 and 6 o'clock. And at the bottom of the driveway, you all know this long driveway from that side? It's a parked UPS truck. I don't know exactly what he was doing, but he's parked. And she rams him from behind, and she's killed.
Oh my God.
How old was she?
She really shouldn't have been driving. I really think it never should have happened. After she hit that cop car, I don't know how that happened. So anyway, Anita Pomerantz, her heir, said, "Where do I sign?" So in 1995, at the annual meeting of the membership, there was a vote to see whether we should buy the new land. Nancy Hagan, remember that? I saw her at lunch a couple of days ago. She was the president then. And it was close to 80% voted for this. And you had people like the Ketchums who never wanted to, everybody knew that that was going to be houses if we didn't buy it. The price was $600,000. But we made it, so it was approved in 95 at the annual meeting. And then a contract was approved in December of 95, a purchase and sale contract. But it was made contingent on getting all the permits for a new 9 holes, okay? And it actually didn't close till June 15, 1997. That's how long the permit process took. All right, so going back to the next slide now. Okay, I didn't realize that was not going to be. So in 1996, there was a survey, and during this survey, people were asked. They wanted a long-range plan at that time. They wanted to see the financing of any new 9 holes. 57% of those surveyed said that they wanted to have a new 9 holes. They wanted an 18-hole golf course. Close to 69% said they didn't want to split up the memberships. Two opposing sort of things. But they did want a long-range plan, putting everything in place and all the financing in place so they could see it. Okay? So the next step for us, I was the golf chairman at the time. We were going over with golf architects. Two were bidding, Jeffrey Cornish and Steve Durkee, who eventually won the bid, for layouts of the course. That was our next step. And when we were laying out the course, Joanne Lembacher, I was speaking to her at the time. She was on the committee, and Don Brody was on the committee, and Austin Felix was on the committee. We walked through several layouts, and Cornish and Durkee weren't really that part in the layouts, but he was going to help us on all the permitting, so that's why he won. He had done Neshabie, he had helped out on Green Mountain Green Mountain course up in Mendon. Anyway, the real ticker that we saw several layouts and they all involved interrupting play. However, if we actually went through a wetland, the course right now is on 3 terraces. The middle terrace that we're on now, the lower terrace where 4 and 5 are, the upper terrace. Okay? But within the terraces, it's not really bad. So if we filled in an acre of wetland and tore up, that's where number 5 ended up being. Okay? If we did that and used the Swanson land as a connector, and now the new Svetlova land with 17 would come back, most of our membership strongly favored not being like Aquanic. Aquanic, if you're familiar with it, number 9's out there in Montana. You have to be 18. They strongly favored 2 things, really, as I recall. They wanted both 9s to end up at a clubhouse, and they wanted a bathroom on top. Those were the big things. And so by filling in this acre of wetland, that could happen. And that's the design we ended up doing because we would never interrupt play. Okay. Now, part of filling in a wetland is the Army Corps of Engineers had a rule that if you filled in more than 3, you could fill up to 3 acres of land and replace it with 3 acres of swampland, of wetland. You could do that. And the state of Vermont said you could fill it up to 1 acre of wetland as long as you replaced it. However, the Army Corps and Engineers, we got our permit, and then the Army Corps changed their rules. So our permit was good for 3 years. But after that, it would have been we could only fill in 1/3 of an acre. So if we didn't build this within 3 years, we couldn't do that layout. Errol Briggs, our wetlands expert, said that. So we had a time crunch. Okay. So the dues structure, I said before, there were only full members, and then there were junior members and social members. Everybody voted, and it was obvious that you had to change that. So since I couldn't read that, I said before the dues before were $1,200 and the $8,600 initiation fee. What we were proposing is a rackets membership where you would go down to $1,000. But if you were going to be full all privilege, it's going to be a $2,080 plus a bond of about $2,350. And it was going to be due in September. You could pay the bond in 3 years. So there was a sweetener for the rackets membership. Okay, that's one of the things that you could do. It was a combination. Don McNamara, the late Don's still with us, I think. Don McNamara was put together the financing. It was half assessments, half of a mortgage note, okay, to make it equitable. So that set up this summer that we had. We're getting all the permits, okay, and to be in place if the vote is good. There are going to be 2 votes. The first one's going to be May 24, 1997. That one is going to be to establish the new rackets membership. Okay. The second vote was on July 5th, 97. And that's whether or not we were going to build the new 9 holes, the new 18-hole golf course. Now, during this time, we're going through the layout. We had a change. We were going to leave everything untouched. Durkee came to us and said, the par 5 at the end is fine, but you can have a really good par 4 if you're not wedded to par 71. He gave us books by Tillinghast saying the last hole should rise above and be higher, and that's why we decided to do the new 18, which is a much grander. Now remember also there was no deck then. Chairs were out here, and I personally hid people eating lunch. It wasn't the greatest of things. It really wasn't. So having that a little farther away was safer, and it was probably much nicer. Okay? So one could argue you could move, the tees up, the men's tees now to the forward tees. It's still 360 uphill, and most of our members still couldn't get up into it. But go figure. Okay? So we had the dues. The budget, this is the budget. Okay? The budget was a little over $1.5 million to do everything, but we had to buy a lot of equipment. So the end number ends up being, after everything was spent, not the one that we budgeted, we were $58,000 over budget when we were building. And we'll have photographs of the building. But anyway, we had to buy a lot of equipment, one of which was a fire truck. We bought an old fire truck for the pump, okay? And in the layout that we had, you know the third hole, okay? Not the third hole, the fourth hole. There's 2 ponds. Okay, in the plans, the pond to the right was supposed to be 2 to 3 times the size of the pond to the left. That's not true anymore. It's because they kept on needing more fill on the 5th hole, and the pond to the left kept getting bigger. While I'm just on the subject of the 4th hole, I'll jump a little bit. After it was all built, it was beautiful. And there were 9 million geese that descended on the 4th hole.
Oh, wow.
And there was a lot of droppings from those 9 million geese. It was a minefield. We thought we were going to have dogs and everything like that. Dave Berard came up with an idea. The idea was he got 4 dead goose decoys, wooden dead goose decoys, put them in the ponds, and the geese went away. I never heard of such a thing. So anyway, now when we're building the course, when we're designing the course, I want to get to this. These are when we start to build stuff, because we haven't had the vote yet. I'm jumping a little bit more than but when they had the design of the course, he talked to us about things. He talked to us about the 18th, but he also talked to us about the upper terrace. Somebody, I think Joanne said, are we going to plant trees? And he goes, oh no, that would wreck all the views. We're going to have mounds, we're going to have fescue, and that will defend it. Now, his idea was on the old courses, you used to have, you could see the 18th, you could see across and see 2 or 3 holes at once. He said, with mounding, we're going to make it so that when you're on one hole, your focus is on that hole. So the next time you play number 15, notice that with the mounds, you can't see any other holes. When you play 16, you really can't see any other holes. Okay?
Yeah.
So it was really, really a nice thing. And a man named Dennis Clark, who we'll have pictures of later on, he was the shaper that they brought in. So I'm kind of digressing a little bit, going back to this vote. This was a really big to-do, a really big to-do. We were changing the membership, and there was no email then. People had letters, and they would put them out. Some put them in the newspaper. Some put them in front of Pelter's store. We disseminated them among the membership. We also, the board decided to disseminate some of the letters in opposition. Jay Hathaway and Bob Keeler was in opposition, the Ketchums, and different people, the Hillses. There was talk that basically the talk against the thing is we're rushing, and this is a big change, we should go slower. This is going to change the character of our club. We've always been a small little, but this is going to change the character. Now, mind you, the new clubhouse isn't in place. Okay, this is going to change the character of our club, and we won't be able to go back. I was golf chairman at the time, and we talked about several things. We talked about tee times and efficiency, and we talked about the Army Corps of Engineers and why we were in a rush, and why exactly did you vote for something to buy land that was contingent on $203,000 worth of permits if you didn't actually think you were going to go forward. But our main argument was it's more fun to play 18 different holes than 9 holes twice. I've been a member since 1972, and I swear, with the exception of the late Maury Warner, I played them more than anybody else. And so it really, by the time it came to the meeting on July 5th, no one really knew how it was going to go. And everybody was exhausted, okay? I remember shaking hands with Penn Reed. I remember Bob Keeler wrote a letter, and Jack Riley wrote a letter back that got disseminated. Jack's point was, of course, the character of the club will change. It has changed already, and it's continuing to change. And he pointed out that we were a tennis club, became more of a golf club, and we become something else. But change is inevitable, so we might as well try to direct the change. So the vote happened, and it's curious that the survey in '96 said that 57% of the members were in favor of expanding to 18 holes, and the percentage that it passed by was 57%. One could argue that nobody was convinced about anything. But the funniest thing was, because all those arguments got out and the process appeared to be fair, there was no acrimony, there weren't resignations. And you could say that victory has 100 fathers and defeats Northam, but I'd rather think that everybody just thought they'd had their say, and we all went on. Because people joined the club for a myriad of reasons, but mostly it's fellowship and competition and camaraderie. That's why we do this. So anyway, we also have some pictures of as the place was going on. This is, I believe this is the fourth hole, the pond. This is the pond, not to the right, to the left. One. Next one. This is Dennis Clark. He's the shaper. This guy was an artist. He was unbelievable. Come out with his dog. He was from Montana. It was great. Dave wanted to be here, but he has personal to go to. This is Clark and Steve Durkee. Now, the last thing you should know, when we were going, we were going through the thing, and Dave joined this club. He didn't join the club. He became an employee of this club in 1987. And we did not have a general contractor for this club. Dave was our controller. Okay? So there was a natural tension between, that's Clark, that's not Durkee because he's short. That's Durkee and Clark. There was a natural tension between Steve Durkee and Dave Berard. It's illustrated, we were following him one day, the golf committee, and when you, so mind you, because the easement through Bear Paw and we could access off the West Road, no construction truck ever came through this entrance. The membership could hear the construction going on, but they couldn't see it. They couldn't see it unless they looked upstream. So there's a couple things. First, trucks by law, if they go backwards, have to go beep, beep, beep. I swear these trucks never went forward. Also, the Act 250 permit said that we couldn't begin before 7 o'clock. The late Nelson Jessup, when Dave's people would just kind of jump the gun by 20 minutes, I'd get a phone call. And that all happened. So we were following. Durkee was with Austin Fields, and I was following with Dave. And we're walking along the 16th tee with the golf committee. Anyway, the last thing you do in a golf course is you put 4 to 6 inches of soil that have been sifted, okay, from rocks. And so you have to do that as the last thing. And we had these sifting machines that were going on forever. Michael, you remember this? They were just like everywhere, all of these tall machines. And Durkee says to Austin, these machines will take care of any rocks that are bigger than that. So Austin goes, well, what about if they're bigger than that? And to Berard's under his breath going, that'd be another $62,000. So he kept tabs on it. One of the hardest things for a painter ever to do is to know when to stop painting. David was the person who was the governor on Steve, saying when to stop painting. When he went on to Manchester, I would argue no one told him to stop painting. There's a little bit more geared up, but we never got jumped up. Okay, so this is number 13. So if you can see that, looking down. Okay, that's looking back. Mitigation hole on number 5. I forgot to say this. Part of the Act 250 permit in the Army Corps of Engineers is we had to fill in an acre of wetland, but we had to create an acre of wetland. So if you're teeing off at number 5, you'll notice to your right there's cattails and all that. We actually had to dig out and create a swamp. And Act 250 people made us take out a $30,000 letter of credit for 5 years to prove that we built a wetland. So, and we had to do that. Number 16, green sites. So this doesn't look quite the way it does now. It had been this junk. The 14th, when we get to that, that's really kind of pronounced. That's number 3. You can still see the hedgerow. Just a second. This you can still. Doug, you'd recognize this. That's still there. There's Doug, you can still see that. So that hill going over, and there's that little grassy thing. That's on 14th. So this is the way 14th looked. Imagine you're going down to your ball today, and you'll notice it's kind of surrounded by trees. They've taken out a lot of trees. The stone wall went down a little farther. Down there was a dry dump. It was raised 10 feet in height, the green to where it is now. But down there was a refrigerator and some bicycles and some farm equipment. I remember a dead dog, but Dave Brock says he doesn't remember that, so I don't know. That's not. One thing it was that there was some half-buried farm equipment off to the right-hand side, and they pulled that out and they created like a crater, and Steve liked it and exaggerated the crater, and that's the crater that's there now. Okay. That's 15 coming back. All right. So this was an alfalfa field beforehand. So, and it's 16 along the side. So you have the Svetlova land all over there. When we bought the Svetlova land, one of the curious things was we actually have an easement through the Svetlova property, now Manly, comes out there. So on the Kellogg Meadow. Okay, and also on 16.
Notice the date on that. Yeah,
Pardon me?
July of 99.
July 99. We began construction. The vote happened on July 5th. Construction began on July 17th. Dave's people were ready to go right away. That's number 17 coming back. The pond, you can see the green. That's the green now. And this is the land that we all bought from Marina that we didn't own. Unbelievable. That was 20,000. So. This is number 4. That's the whole. This is the one to the right. We have to build still the one to the left. This one, that right-hand pond, furnishes all the water for all the irrigation in the entire field. Wow. Okay. About the same time, just because when it rains it pours in '96, the septic failed the field pump. And we used to have the septic. There's a burial mound of leach fields on the 18th hole. And it pretty well had enough. The new septic system, this was more part of the Act 250 permit when the clubhouse came, but it's pumped all the way across the Prentice Brook, up the hill, past the 16th hole. And you know that area, this sort of no man's land between the 12th and the 16th? That's where our septic field is. Okay, go on. This is the tractor recovery. We spent, one of the Act 250 criteria is criterion 8, historical things. We spent $16,000 to pay an archaeologist to see if there were any Indian heads or anything historical. The only thing we found is this old tractor. Now, I asked the guy, we're spending $16,000. Do you have any evidence whatsoever that there's anything here? And he goes, we have no data for your district. And I said, wait, you're using Act 250 projects as a way to finance data collection? Yes. That's it. But we did find this. It was between the two holes. Somebody just put it there, and now they put it up near number 13. So.
That's the last slide.
Oh, okay. So, anyway, as a caveat to after the course is built, we have this ceremony. A couple little things to let you know. We were over by $32,000. The second thing is right towards the end, number 1, which used to be number 7, was a hill that you hit into, and you have no idea where the ball is going. None. It was very unfair. We spent $32,000 knocking down that hill. If you're familiar with Equinox number 13, when they did that renovation, they knocked down that hill. Before that, it was even more unfair because there used to be an elm tree that just was way over. You hit it on the right, you had to hit it into the elm tree, hope to hell it careened onto the green or whatever. But that took a little bit extra too. In the year 2000, the Dorset Players and the Dorset Theater Festival renovated the Playhouse. And they created a basement, and they had a massive amount of dirt over there. The late Paul Robinson went over there and said, "What are you going to do with all that dirt?" I don't know. So he got our guys to take all the dirt, and that's all the mounds on the 11th hole. All of that was built up because of the dirt in the Dorset Field for the Dorset Players. That's what that happened. So that's one cover, and I covered about the geese. I'm going to end with another story. I'll end with this. It was about 3 months before the club was going to open, the new 9 holes, the new 18-hole course. And John McCallum and Sven-Gunnar Lindström, these 2 gentlemen in their 80s, wrote me a letter saying, "We gentlemen of distinction would like to play the most forward tees. So we'd like you to put it on the scorecard that they're the most forward tees. If you call them the ladies' tees, there'll be a certain stigma attached, and we will not be able to play them." So I wrote him back and said, "Fine." And then about a month before, in June, John McCallum, now I'm no longer on the board. Jack Howler's now the chairman. He corrals me and grabs me and says, "Those tees are painted red. If they're red, they're the ladies' tees, and I don't care what you call them." And I go, "What color do you want them?" And he goes, "Green would be nice." That's why they're green. Now I asked Dave Bernard if he remembered that, and he goes, "Do I remember having all the tee markers painted and having to repaint them? Gee, Kevin, I remember that." So anyway, I've tried to cover everything. Hopefully it hasn't been too disjointed. Does anybody have questions? Okay, Barry.
We're all proud of our heritage, but let me ask you this. With all these land acquisitions, what did they play golf on in 1886?
I was saying to this people, we are the oldest club if you say it a certain way. When we're putting that historical plaque together, we really negotiated that. They can correct me. If you say we're the oldest course continuously played on the same site, then I think we're fine. However, in all the Golf Digest and all the earlier things, when William Barrows Sr. was saying we're the oldest, they were all saying no one could ever find an original bylaw. But when Mr. Bailey was about to buy his house from the west, on the West Road, Dorset West Road, the one with all the spruce trees and everything. Jim Fassholz, the late Jim Fassholz, found one. And it says 1896. That's the first time we had bylaws. And Hal Miller, the late Hal Miller was president, wanted me to destroy it. It's now in that case over there. So if you want to say they're oldest for bylaws, 1896. St. Andrews, they're saying they're the oldest by far with the bylaws, but they moved to Yonkers, so they're no longer on the same site. There's a couple others who still are playing on the same layout. We have several layouts that we've had. The only one in my lifetime I really remember is in the early 70s. If you're playing number 1 or you're playing on number 18, you'll see like there's this plateau in the middle. That was the tee to the second hole, okay? 185 yards. Extremely unpopular with everybody but me. And it only lasted 2 years, and afterwards, Barry Wall had a weeping willow planted that's since been taken down. There was a weeping willow to the left, right in the middle of that path to prove if anyone was ever that stupid again. They should so if you say it a certain way, you can say we're that. I would commend you to, if you go just in the men's locker room, or a lady can go just inside the office, we have a picture of Ramson Gillette teeing off in the 1800s. And he's on the, if he's teeing off this way, and the sixth hole is this way. You know that berm? It's kind of like a whale right there. People are putting in there. People are putting in there. And you can see it. Ramson Gillette is one of our founders. You might recall that our 1886 is based on a map that says this course was laid out on Sunday, September 12, 1886 by A.W. Harrington, chief engineer and mayor of the city, who lives where Dick Hiddle lives now, assisted by a crowd of thugs, touts, and loafers, all of whom caught hell when he got home because he was late for dinner, all of which I'll swear to, Ramson Gillette. And this guy teeing off is Ramson Gillette. These were 12 guys from Troy. Okay, so our founding members were just guys from Troy who didn't take themselves that seriously and hope, we don't either. So there were some other questions? Okay, Frank?
Just going back to Durkee and Cornish, and the proposals you were seeing for layouts.
The layouts,
Were they similar, or like how would you characterize?
we kind of
that?
discounted the ones that were going to discontinue, going to interrupt play. The one that they actually, for the layouts, was very similar, going through the wetland, extremely similar. But
Okay.
Durkee was going to help us with the permitting process, and Cornish wasn't.
Okay,
And that's really,
because it's interesting, the 130th anniversary, the history book,
right.
the very first page that talks about the new line, there's a photocopy of a routing. It's not the routing that we have now.
There were about 3 or 4, but all of them,
It was a completely opposite clockwise routing that would have blown up the 7th and 6th holes.
there were about 7 different routings
Okay.
that were talked about. And what won us over is we didn't discontinue play.
I understand.
And the thing about it is, because we didn't discontinue play, it took 2 years to build. We never used sod. We used grass. And then we could let it go. And Durkee said, these greens are not going to hold for 2 years, and then they will. Michael, and it's pretty well true. It was about 2 years, and then they finally started to hold. So it was. We got the luxury that other clubs didn't. When Equinox went through theirs, they had to do it within golf seasons. So they had to use sod galore and stuff like that. So when you think about, we spent $600,000 on the land, $203,000 on the permits. The course construction, design, and equipment was $1.739 million. Spent $41,000 on the Pinio land. Spent $20,000 on the Svetlova. Prior to 1969, they don't have transfer tax returns, so I can't say. On Swanson, we spent $50,000. So, all in all, we did very, very well. So, there are other questions?
What, did all of the, in the original or the old design, did all of the holes have two sets of tees?
Yes, every single one. And 2 sets of tees. And I mean, like I said, number 6 was the hardest because it was 231 par 4, and then it was a 255 par 3, and a 255 par 4. But it was just all woods down there. Just all woods. Yes.
I marvel at the clarity of the water on the pond to the right on Ford. What's the water source for that?
Springs.
Springs?
I remember they thought that they were going to have to put a liner. They never did. It's back. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Water.
We have only 3 water hazards on this course, and we do have. When people say how long the course is, it's deceiving because we only have 1 par 5 on the back 9, not 2. Okay, and we have 3 par 3s. We have 2 par 3s, so it's a little deceiving. But when you actually start to look at if it's particularly the championship tees, the length, number 11 is 430, 11 is 431, 13 is 425, 15 is about 420. No, 13 is 433, 15 is 425. The back tee on the number 16 is 560, and the championship tee on 18 is 425. So you've got some real distance. The amount of people who use, let's just say the blue tees are in pristine shape. I tried to qualify for the club championship, and amazingly, I got a 3 years running my first round of the Blue Tastes for the qualify. So like, not the way to go. So, are there other questions anybody has?
I just, Kevin, that was excellent, really superb. I just, Kevin and I don't agree on the 1886 date. I was very cynical and skeptical of it. But if you go back into the archives, I found pictures of a hayride that was held here in 1886, and several pictures of tennis players in 1886. And if you look at their attire, they're wearing the same attire that the U.S. champion, a guy named Sears, who won the national championship from 82 to 88, wearing the same clothes. And then I went back and researched when those rackets were made, and they were made in the 1880s. So I'm of the school, this club, in my mind, is definitely older than St. Andrews. There's a club in Pennsylvania called Foxburg,
Right.
which is still there, and there may be a 6 or 8 month difference between these two clubs, but those are
Bill
clearly-
Barrow Sr., who he used to just swear, and it's based on the map. Also Gibbs Sykes.
Right. Yeah.
In 1886, Bill Barrow Sr. in these digest articles just swears, I know when it was built, it was 1886. He based it all on the map. We're pretty freaking old.
Yeah, I was looking for independent verification, and I think I found it in the photos. And then, studying the photos, the attire and whatnot, we don't have the same photos of the golf players. We have.
I just
and
remember the
they're not-
bylaw.
They're not dated, yeah. And then the other thing is, I was also the historian at Greenwich, and we had a debate about the founding date there, and I was part of that. And the USGA doesn't have any rules in terms of what is the criteria. And we decided that the criteria is when you had your first golf competition. I mean, if somebody's out playing golf, that's one thing, but when you start to have a competition, then you have a formation of a club, and that was the criteria that we applied, and I think
There's
that's
a couple of other dates come on. The 1896 for having bylaws, I've talked to Dick about this. This is my theory. They built Woodruff Hall in 1896 on Harrington's land.
Right.
I think they all said, boys, I think we ought to have bylaws if we're going to build a building. Don't you think? And I think that's what happened. 1918 is the first time the field club ever owned land. And that's the year they were incorporated because you had to date it to something. And so I think Harrington was getting a little old. So
I
they
also
did that.
think you don't build a clubhouse unless you've been functioning for some
Right.
period of time before you get enough support, enough.
And Woodruff Hall was
yeah.
dead.
Yeah,
It's dead.
yeah,
They named it after.
Sure.
Yeah, and Kevin, but what about, the beer is 1886 and the hat's also.
I've got a lot of hats. I've got a shirt on with a tree. What's the old line from Simon and Garfunkel? Preserve your memories. They're all that's left. So I want to thank you all for coming.